Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Morning. Danielle. How are you? I'm good. Thanks.
Doing great. Thanks for joining us today. I just wanted you to kind of introduce yourself and tell us where you are in your background.
My name is Mark Surabian, and I run a free assistive technology clinic in New York City called AT Help. I've been in the field of assistive tech for about 40 years, and I support all individuals, all ages, and all disabilities and all challenges that people face. Technology is really valuable for helping people do the things they want to do, but can't necessarily do them independently. And so that's what I try to do is help people find the right tools.
That's wonderful. Can you just tell us what sparked your interest in that?
It's funny, I was a high school teacher and I volunteered at a home for kids who were medically fragile. And what I was frustrated about was these kids couldn't play. They didn't have anything to play with that was accessible. So some friends taught me how to hack toys, and we made the toys accessible so the kids could play with them through switches and different forms of physical access tools that we made and found. And from then on, I became a hobbyist, like most of the people that started in this field over 40 years ago. And slowly, we fought for accessibility in tools and in private, software and products. And it's become a whole field called assistive tech. And especially for education, for learning, and for daily lives, those tools have really, grown considerably. And one of the things I suppose we want to talk about today is they're built into all the devices you have now. So into your phones and your tablets and your computers, you have all these tools that can help you do your work or your leisure in a more functional, accessible way. It's a really exciting thing to help people with. It's really fun, actually.
Yeah, it's a fantastic career and so needed. And one of the things I wanted to talk with you about today is something that you brought up when we first met, which was we talked a little bit about neurodiversity, and there's a lot of buzz right now in the field, right? And you said, well, maybe one day we won't even need to have like an assistive tech conversation because everyone will be using technology in a way that's inclusive. Could you just kind of like describe what you mean by that and what your vision is for the future with disability and integration?
I think one of the easiest ways for a person who does not consider themselves as having a disability to understand this conversation would be looking at your television. A lot of people like to put on the captions on their TVs when they're watching a movie because it helps them enjoy the movie in more depth. They get all the dialogue visually and auditorily. And that support shows that a lot of these assistive tech tools are valuable for everyone. So, in other words, that captioning was for someone that might have a hearing loss or might even be deaf. It also helps people who have language issues, etc. It wasn't meant for the general population, but everybody enjoys it. And so if you look at your phones, for example, and there's things that I can show you that there are accessibility features in your phones that help people with disabilities, but actually help everyone. And so as you look through them, you realize that the environments that we're in are not accessible to everybody. And these tools are an attempt to kind of make sure that everybody can participate. You can't make the world fair, but you can make it accessible. And so that's really the most important thing is that where you are in leisure, at work, in school, you have a right to participate and to be able to show who you are and what you can do. And when people build these environments, schools, workplaces, et cetera, even leisure places, they don't consider the entire community because they don't know the entire community. They don't know that there might be a person who's blind or a person who actually cannot handwrite legibly, so they need a keyboard. They don't know that there are all these different people in their community that need to access their place, equally. And so they don't really consider that. So assistive tech makes it so that everybody can find a tool to get into that place and participate. Typically school is where we look. You look at like K through 12 and even college, and you see a lot of students get there and they realize that, they can't access the material the way their peers do. And they need some type of support. It used to be human support. Now it can be technological, which is really important because then that person can be more independent. So, for example, in the old days, for anyone who was blind, had a physical disability, dyslexia, or any learning challenge that prevented them from taking notes. They actually needed a human being to take notes for them. Now we have multiple tools that can help them take notes on their own, control those notes, and process those notes at the level that they need to. So this independence and participation really is the whole key. And that, excuse me, will change the world, because if everybody can find their form of access, then everybody can participate, then everybody can be a member of a community. I think that's what keeps people out. It's not always individuals that keep you out. It's the structure that's been designed by individuals that keeps people out. So I'm hoping it breaks down barriers. And in the future, the more that we add, the more tools that we add, the more barriers are not put up,
Yep. Yeah.
because people know that they existed, right? Your generation is better at seeing these barriers than mine was. Mine built a whole bunch. I mean, a curb is the best example. Wheelchairs have been with us for 4,000 years, since the Egyptians, and yet we just started putting curbs in about 80 years ago. Why? We had wheelchairs in our community, wheelchair users, and yet we built curbs in front of them because we didn't even think. We didn't even consider them. We consider people when we do city planning. Um,
Mm.
Change
Yeah,
happens.
I like that. It's like seeing things in a different way and training your mind to see things from a different perspective. So, okay, so could you just tell us, like, in terms of the conversation, let's just pick dyslexia, right? Because I have a lot of audience members who have challenges with executive functioning, reading or interpretation, social emotional translation, communication challenges. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the things that might be available to help? Um, with a challenge like dyslexia or note taking? Do you have any top apps or tips that we could tell our viewers about?
First and foremost, the tools that you have, your phone and your computer, are almost sufficient in themselves. Your computers are capable of recording things that are going on in a room. Your phone is capable of that. Your computer and your phone are capable of helping you support your notes and organize your notes so that they're not just linear and typed, that you can organize them and move them around like you can with paper. There are also apps, though, that are out there. Like, for example, one of the apps that is very common for people is Microsoft Office. And in Microsoft Office, a whole bunch of accessibility features are built in. If you were to look at, for example, a very little, how would I say it, infrequently used app called OneNote that's built into Microsoft Office. In there, you can type your notes and organize them in any way you want, annotate them, record what's being said in a work session or a class, put video in there, combine documents together and put them in there as icons so you can load them and find them. In other words, you can make this workspace that is multifaceted and allows you to get access to everything you need in one place, because a lot of us have trouble organizing our ideas or our workspace. So that OneNote app is so underutilized and has so much power in it.
Mm.
And also you can actually do voice dictation into it as well and talk to it and actually turn audio into so it has all those features. And that's something I say that app because there's a free version of Word Online that has some of those features. And of course, there's a paid version that most people have at work. So you definitely want to look there first. There are private apps too. Like, for example, for a lot of college students, we use Glean, GLEAN.co. And we use Glean because Glean is able to take an audio recording, the handouts or a PowerPoint or whatever the person who's speaking is using, and your typed notes, and combine them all into one little segment so that you only have to study those little segments and not listen to the entire recording. So there are wonderful tools out there for students and for workers to find. The list goes on and on. I didn't mean to just promote those two products, but another one really quickly that a lot of office professionals use is called Otter AI. And
Mhm.
it records everything that's said in a session, and then it gives you a live transcription as well. So you can have the recording and the transcription and make sure that they line up perfectly for your notes later. And AI itself, like for example, right now on Zoom, the AI that's built into Zoom right now can give me a summary of this entire session. And it's actually quite extraordinary. I mean, you have to check it and make sure it has everything, but it really does a lot of the work for you. I'm actually quite impressed by that. It actually organizes everything in a really summative way that is, supportive for you later after you want to know what the meaning and what everybody spoke about, which I find very fascinating. So let's just put it this way, there is a tool for everybody. You just either have to know how to go down the rabbit hole and find them, or find people like myself for free to help you, seek these out. But everybody can find something to
Yeah.
help them access.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you for highlighting a few great tools. I mean, I think having a list, even on our website, of your recommended tools and tips will go along with this video after this. Will be a great downloadable handout for our readers. And then just linking to your workshop. Can you tell us about your workshop and like who's coming to this and how
Right.
do people find out about you and who else is out there doing this type of work? Because I looked at your background and this is why I chose you to come on my podcast, is because there's not that many people with this knowledge and depth of insight into the field. Can you just tell us a little bit about who else is out there? Where do we find these types of resources? How do we find more of you? And tell us about your workshop.
There are two very large conferences in the country, ATIA and Closing the Gap. And those two conferences are where all of us assistive tech geeks hang out, and a lot of the users of assistive tech hang out, because it's really the users that are taking control of this field, rightfully so. And they're the ones telling us what needs to be built, and they're building it themselves. So our field is evolving. It used to be a bunch of teachers and therapists that would hack the world together. And now it's becoming the users actually becoming the designers and the builders in your generation. And so there aren't a lot of people that do what we do, unfortunately. I'm probably in the city of New York, maybe 200 people that are familiar with these types of tools. And when you think of the hundreds of thousands of people with disabilities in the city of New York, that's not enough. So one of the things that we decided to do, along with Adapt in Brooklyn has their own free assistive technology center. We decided to create a free little assistive tech center over at the JCC in Manhattan about 15 years ago. And we have some grants from some very nice folks who've helped us offer these services for free to about 5,000 people so far and about 100 schools. So we train professional organizations and schools for free as well. We just want people to know about these tools. Now, we help individuals on Zoom typically, unless a person has very complex needs, and we can make a house call. But we help a person look at listen to the problems they're facing and participating. And participation is the key word. It's wherever you can't participate and you want to, that's the purpose of the tech. What can't you do that you would like to do? And let's try to find a tool for it. So it's listening to that person, hearing what they need or what they think they need. And if they just imagine it, I'll bet you we find it, because there is one place where all of our tools really are listed. The unified, oh my gosh, I always forget the name of it. The unified listing. It's called the unified listing. It's a group of 5 international databases on assistive tech. So in other words, whatever you can imagine probably has already been designed
Yeah.
and to support your needs. So just believe there's something out there. Find someone like me or go to the unified listing, and you can probably find support for yourself.
Fantastic. After this segment, when we post this segment below it, everyone will be able to see a link to your workshop and some resources and all the links that you're talking about. I just went on and looked at Glean, actually, and the stats are incredible. 65% of students that pop up do not seek help or assistive technology support. 65% of students with disabilities. I think if we could just have these conversations sooner. I mean, could you talk to that as just how can we make this more of an everyday conversation from when children are young?
Yeah. The only positive thing to come out of the pandemic truly was the tech literacy that took over the entire country. Everyone finally knows how to use the tools in front of them sufficiently to just get online.
Right.
Now, children are seen as being tech natives. That's kind of misleading. They're tech users. In other words, they know how to play with the tools, they know how to access them, because tools are designed actually for little kids. Your phone is actually probably designed for like a 5-year-old when you think about it. It's really simplistic. The only reason why it looks complex to us is because we overthink it. So kids do naturally take to tech, but that doesn't mean they know what to do with it.
Right.
And And they're also going to listen to us. So if you have a little guy who's dyslexic or having some problem reading or writing, he's going to want to, quote, be like us, the adults. And he'll see us handwrite, he'll see us read independently, and he thinks that that is what he considers as normal. And he won't even tell you this. He'll just think that because he's watching us. If we don't set the norm and say that listening to a book is normal, that Braille is normal, that reading a book with your eyes is normal, that there are all these different ways to be literate, and he doesn't understand that, he's going to think there's only one path. And if he can't follow that path, it leads to some real mental health issues for this little guy. So to get to them early, my program, my idea is to go into the preschools and to teach them how to use technology in a useful way, not just for play, not as a babysitter, but to functionally use it to tell their own stories through audio and visual supports, to actually listen to their own stories, to be able to enjoy lessons after class without a teacher, to be able to just participate and stay engaged in learning early on. So I did an experiment with some preschoolers, and they all spoke into their iPads and they saw it being typed out. So they saw words being created from their ideas. And then they played it back and listened to it and had a voice, read their story. And they were so delighted. They kept telling more stories and more stories. And it really motivated them. That's not them playing a game on a piece of technology. That's not what we're worried about. We want them to see that technology has a functional value in their worlds. So if you teach little guys in preschool and little guys in, say, kindergarten and first and second grade, how text to speech, speech to text, word prediction, all these tools work to create, and synthesize their ideas and put them in a real form. When and if they end up having some type of learning challenge, they are already prepared. See, assistive tech is a reactionary service. We wait till someone hits a wall, and then we try to help them get over that wall,
Right.
that obstacle. That's the way it's been for decades. The way it needs to be is proactive. Like you had indicated in the beginning, this stuff just has to be everywhere, a part of the community, a part of our educational lessons, and so forth. And therefore, kids will adopt it before we can even teach them. They'll just adopt it. And when they hit a wall, they'll think to themselves, well, wait a minute, I can't read this, but I can listen to it. And then I can participate in the conversation today and talk to my peers and my teacher, and they'll see what I know. And then eventually I'll learn to read. And so that's where the problem comes in. Everybody says, Mark, if we give this to everybody, then some students will choose not to read, not to write, not to do things in a normal or independent way, because it will become a crutch. There is actually no evidence to that. In 40 years of us using assistive tech, no evidence that it's been a crutch where a person has not developed independent skills at all. But there is evidence on our side proving that it actually complements all of the lessons we're doing in literacy or whatever else we're teaching, executive functioning skills, et cetera. Whatever we're teaching kids, these tools have been proven to sustain their interest while we're teaching them, because it takes time to teach them how to do it themselves. It keeps them in the game, keeps them participating, keeps them learning, improves their comprehension. It's a complement. So we have studies to prove that. Problem is, we don't teach teachers about assistive tech, so they don't know these studies exist. And we don't teach parents about this. So the parents are like, Mark, I want them to just push through and get it done. I have 2 dyslexics in my family. The emotional pain that those kids went through because they were denied assistive tech because it would be a crutch is unfathomable. It wasn't until they were young adults that they were allowed to use these tools. And they'll tell you how frustrating that is. Some kids really never learn to read independently as well as they should, even with years of intervention. Not everybody has that success. And so to watch them finally be able to control the written word with these tools, and how stress relieving and how wonderful that feels. I have tons of people you could speak to and interview that would tell you about what's that like. And so our idea is to have these tools in the kids' hands so that they can decide whether or not they need them, And then they can also change the climate in their classroom, because if Joey wants to listen to a book and Jane wants to read a book, no one judges them. Everybody can participate the way they want, and all learning is valued. And what's interesting about that, we even have research on reading and reading that indicates that listening to a book and reading a book with your eyes, that information is stored in the exact same part of the brain and retrieved in the exact same way equally. So they're actually equal.
Yeah,
It
and
is,
we'll post
yeah.
the.
So anyway, yeah, we'd like to change that climate so that everybody finds access. And I think it will help teachers and students and families in the long run, you know.
I think too, just listening to you talk, you're painting this vision for a new future, and it's so beautiful. And like one of the things that I keep coming back to is just we are stuck with our form of communication. And you are talking about changing that at the ground level, is opening doors for communicate. I mean, if we could just communicate better as a species, we could end world wars. I mean, right? Like if people could really start to understand different perspectives, I mean, communication at an individual level is such a challenge, even within interpersonal relationships, romantic relationships, workplace relationships. Understanding perspective taking is challenging for us. I mean, could you maybe even speak to that? Like, are there any tools that help with perspective taking? Because perspective taking is something that's really challenging for neurodivergent populations, you know, and I try to help with this, but I struggle with it myself. I mean, could you just talk a little bit about it with the social emotional learning component? Do you know of anything out there to help with that?
Well, I think what you're hinting at is a great place to start, which is the very structure of these things starting to emerge and becoming part of the everyday life that you see. That's the environment influencing us. So if I say to you, we're all sitting around the table, and I say all voices should be heard, you know, the neurodiversity of people should be celebrated, you may or may not listen to me. But if the structure already has that accessibility built in, you can't ignore it. You could ignore me, but you can't ignore the environment. And so
Yeah.
if your environment has all these different ways to participate, and you see all these accessibility features on your phone, and you like some of them, and you don't consider yourself to be one who needs them, that structure starts to dictate how we see everyone. That, wow, why would someone need that? It would make you question it. So I think as these things become commonplace and we realize that everybody has access, that's a start. So the environment changes. Then you see people in that environment. So, for example, last year in my grad class at Bank Street that I was teaching, 2/3 of my class had disabilities.
Well,
2/3 of my students identified as having disabilities.
hmm.
That is such a massive change over the past 30 years of teaching. I can't believe how many, and I had to accommodate them all, which was actually quite hard to figure out how the assistive tech would fit in the class. But I was thrilled. I couldn't believe that these students had access to graduate level education because they didn't in my generation. And so first it's the environment, then it's the presence of those people. So the representation matters. And then beyond that, the tools themselves, I think the only way in my field to get at what you're getting at is to not only celebrate the tools, but to celebrate the right to these tools. That accessibility, the discussions on this accessibility should happen for everyone. It shouldn't be this little boy wants access to your class. Let's talk about him and why he should have access to your class. It should be a conversation why everyone deserves access. And because everybody will face an obstacle at one point in their life. So if we have this conversation about everybody has a right to be included and we can build such environments, I think that's the best way to teach it. Because I've had students who identify as autistic discriminate against students, say, who are dyslexic. I mean, it's no one's perfect here. I mean, so students with disabilities actually rejecting other students with disabilities. I've had a young man who had Down syndrome come up to a young man who has cerebral palsy in a wheelchair and pat him on the head like he's a little baby and be condescending to him. It's unbelievable. We all discriminate.
Yeah.
And so everybody has to see everybody in an environment. And so do we have tools like that? Well, we have, tools that might, I think they're more ed tech and more therapy tools that would allow for conversations and so forth. But it's mostly about everybody participating in the class at the same time. So one person's listening to a book, another one's reading the book, another one's using Braille, another one's having a translation. If that can all occur in one class, universal design, then I think what you're asking for will naturally occur with a few conversations, you know?
Definitely. Years back, I was in a research study with non-speaking, non-verbal students with autism, and we had a little like robotic guy. It was a Now robot, and we
Mm,
put the Now robot in the classroom with an interactive iPad, and we had the students around the iPad. And the idea behind this research, which is probably outdated right by now, this was back in probably 2014, 2015, was could the technology be a bridge in a social component for those students with more complex need and non-speaking behavior as a means of joining attention, right? We talk about joint attention.
right.
And it was a really interesting research piece and paper that got published out of that, which I'll link after this as well with your video. And I have always believed that. I mean, I've always believed that the technology has the ability to mirror our experiences and reflect them back to us, or to mirror our experiences and reflect them to another person. And the social emotional piece of that, and it's so exciting to see that the world is catching up with that, right? It's like the understanding each other. How can we understand each other better? And of course there's continuation of barriers from technology that we see, right? And the cons of it as well. But I love all the pros that you're painting, and the imagery that you're painting about what a classroom can look like.
I
So yeah.
Yeah, I think that the key component there is we were making things for it. Let's use people who are autistic for example here. When I first started in the field back in '87, I was fascinated by how my students who were autistic really connected with the computer. And then I realized that it was the consistency, the stability, the security, the constancy of things always being a certain way that made them feel so comfortable and safe. You know, if they saw their teacher one day with all these emotions, hi, how are you? And the next day their teacher's like, hi, how are you? But their computer was always the same lessons, and they felt safer there. So it was interesting. It was this security. And so we tried to take that and realize what can we do to help make a bridge for those kids to be with other people, or to, like you said, recognize emotions or empathy. We wanted to see how they could connect with the world around them through it. And we've come up with lots of things like the robot, like interactive gaming that we call embodied learning now, like Keenums. Keenums is an interactive gaming system which, you know, really pulls kids into visuals, but then it also has them participate with others. We have another tool out there called it's a virtual reality game, and it's eluding me right now, but this one you wear a headset and it actually focuses on joint attention and helps you attend and focus and really interact with your environment visually. So we made up all these things for people who are autistic, but we really didn't ask them. So these are all wonderful experiments. But now we need the Temple Grandins of the world who said, listen, I built this compression vest for me. I think it will work well for animals. She took her own personal experience and helped animals that way. I think we need to listen to people who are autistic saying, listen, this is what works for me, or this is what might help me. This is what might help other people. And so that ability for people who can give us insight, who are autistic, we need to be listening to them to build the next generation of these things. Like virtual reality and augmented reality are going to give us a lot of opportunities for empathy and understanding and really creating the community that you're talking about. But we need people with insight to develop those. One of the students who's been helping me with a lot of projects, he's a young man who is autistic, and his insights have been invaluable to me so that I can see his perspective on how we should set up materials, et cetera, to reach other kids who have gone through what he's gone through in school. So I think those tools are really nice attempts. We just really need to listen to people who might benefit from them. And secondly, it's kind of a mistake in our field, using autism again as a subject, to think that a category or a culture of people, say an autistic culture, blind culture, deaf culture, that a tool is specifically for them.
Yeah.
No, the tools we build are actually for everybody. So there's not an autistic tool for this or that. There are tools that help everybody. And if a person is autistic or myself who has ADHD, we might both benefit from it. So we got to avoid classifying tools by medical diagnoses or whatever it is that we're using, and keep them as just emancipatory tools that can be used for anyone. So my best example is the blind child, the dyslexic child, and the physically disabled child all have the same disability in a school. They can't use your textbook. So their disability is not those medical diagnoses. Their disability is the textbook. Write an IEP, it should be textbook, textbook, textbook. How do we fix it? Not how do we fix the kid? The kid doesn't need to be fixed, but that's the old model. The model here is, how do we fix that textbook so that everybody can participate?
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Fix the environment, not the person.
Yeah, 100%. Let me ask, I am having a hard time with email etiquette. Okay. This is a big challenge. And this is popping in my head. And I think maybe I want to have you talk about this. We'll end on this. And then I want to post everything you've talked about today with more links and maybe even a link to your workshop. But okay, so email etiquette, right, is this unspoken professional thing, right, that just everyone just gets. We just get it. We go into the workplace, and when you're emailing a higher up, you just get it. Well, you don't just get it. And there are so many people who are struggling with communication digitally in the workplace via email, and we know that people who get promoted and who become managers and become CEOs are part of this unspoken society of email doers who just get emails and how to communicate their thoughts in, a persuasive, bulleted, quick way that gets to the top of the inbox. It gets answered. We're having professional meetings. And I'm telling you, my clients who are ADHD or autistic or whatever, don't even have a diagnosis, but are struggling with this, are being held back in the workplace. Can you please help us understand how to even translate email etiquette? I mean, I put out templates around what is an intro email? What is BCC? You would not believe how many people don't understand BCC. Just maybe, is there anything that we can do to decode this?
First and foremost, ISTE, International Society for Tech and Education, has a whole training program for school children on becoming a digital citizen. So first and foremost, I think people should look at those tools and realize that we should be teaching all kids the etiquette online. So all kids should be going through this, and not enough schools know that ISTE exists. It's a massive organization and a wonderful conference. So taking their materials about how to be a digital citizen, they have a lot of guidance on everything that you just said, from email etiquette to safety online to a whole bunch of areas. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, we need to take a lot of that they've built and simplify it for a lot of people that might have intellectual challenges. So we want to make sure that they are also safe online. Thirdly, there are people that have attempted to develop things that you're talking about, but first and foremost, what you're doing with people one-on-one is still the best method. But AI is stepping up. So over at Khan Academy, Sal Khan's been working on Khanmigo, which is your own little private tutor. And this little tutor will actually help you go through things in your classes and talk to you. And you can ask them questions and see how it is. Now, could it do this? Hey, what do you think about this text I wrote or this email? Do you think it's appropriate?
Love. That's
I don't know if it can do that, but I think that's where AI is going, which is, can you help me write this a little better so that I don't sound sarcastic? But of course, you have to know what to ask the AI. So I've had a person who's dyslexic not get partnership in a law firm because his emails were inadequate. Yes. And then I've had a young man who was autistic who found incredible frustration in the workplace because he wasn't reading into the emails what he should have been reading into, or not realizing that people were reading into his emails, as you implied. And so, yes, this is a really serious thing.
Huge barrier.
Yeah, AI will be I think, a really good solution for that. I think we'd have to experiment. And I'm sure there's something that already exists along those lines, though.
Yeah, I love it. I think I'm so excited to see the creative ways that people can take AI and apply it to societal challenges. Mark, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your beautiful vision of the world, your insights, your knowledge, and how could people get a hold of you? Could you just tell our viewers where they can go to either get a hold of you or your workshop or your website.
I think the best way to do it is to just um, email me at athelp.org. So athelp.org. And you can also go to my website, which we need to actually revamp. So there's a lot of old information on there, but that's athelp.org. And finally, I'll just say to everybody, go to your phone, look up the accessibility features on Windows and iOS. I mean, Windows phones, iOS phones, and Android phones. Look up the accessibility features and play with them and see what's there, and just discover that this stuff is all around you. So your phone has enough to support you at work right now. You just have to look at it. If you need help, you can contact us anytime.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was a pleasure to have you, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.